So, nach der Mittagspause sage ich erstens willkommen zurück auf Deutsch, wechsle aber sofort ins Englische. We shall continue now with our next block, Media and Politics in the Southern Mediterranean Region. And first of all, I have to announce one change, a change which is very relevant to what we're talking about, mobility, being dependent on being given a visa on time. Unfortunately, with Karim El-Shanavi from Egypt, was the case that he did not get a visa on time. You saw him already on the film this morning, and I had met him when, together with Stakia Abeneba in Berlin, in our media panel discussion. Karim was also a member of the panel discussion, and I know he was very, very much looking forward to coming to Karlsruhe and to being with us. We had hoped also to be able to show part of his film on the question of Salafist. But we shall be talking about these things in any case, because as worlds are sometimes very large, but sometimes quite small, it transpires that Omar Shoeb is also a friend of Karim's, and of course knows his work very well. And so after we first have, as in the program announced, the presentation by Omar Shoeb on the thin blue line, on the growing dependency of traditional media on social media in Egypt, we shall then have a conversation, just the two of us, and then of course we shall bring in the public to talk a little about what Karim probably would have told us. And I think also it is particularly interesting then to have a look and see what is happening in Egypt. For those of you who were at our event yesterday evening, we did have a Skype connection to Gianluca Solera. The members of the Anna Lindh network know him, of course, very well. We could see him, hear him, not always extremely well, but unfortunately Gianluca couldn't hear me, because we had hoped last night, to be able to ask him about what is happening in Egypt. I think a very, very fragile, interesting situation, but we'll talk about that later. Shoeb will also just explain to us some of the things we forgot to put in the Vitas, so I do apologize, and also say to anybody else who finds that maybe some extremely important parts of the Vita is not in our little account here in the pamphlet, let us know, and we shall put it into the online version so that you have that another time. Shoeb, the stage is yours. Omar, I should say, sorry, Omar.
Well, Shoeb is my grandfather, so I don't mind that much. Thank you for having me here today. When I got the invitation at first and read that it was about migration, I first started thinking about how Egypt is one of the largest immigration countries in the world. We have immigrants coming in from Libya, from Palestinian territories, from Syria, Jordan, South Africa, and all of its diverse countries. But then I came to a conclusion that maybe this was actually overly represented in the Western world, with many institutions highlighting this. what is not highlighted in Egypt is that there is a very strong internal migration that's been going on since 1952. Egypt is a home to a multicultural people. We have Nubians, south of Egypt. We have Bedouins in Sinai. We have Upper Egyptians. We call them Saida, or the farmers. This has been their primary source of income ever since Egypt was created on the map. 1952 saw former President Gamal Abdel Nasser rise to power with a promise of a better life with his interpretation of socialism and communism. This started a mass exodus to Cairo since 1952 and until this present day. Cairo, actually Egypt, which houses 82 million people, has seen the internal migration of over 25 million people going to Cairo. If you allow me, I will concentrate on only one type of migrants who live in Cairo now and are completely and utterly disregarded in traditional media. This, of course, has changed in recent years and for reasons that I will talk about at the end. Cairo is home to 1,250 slums. These slums house 14 to 15 million people. Do you grasp this number? These people are the victims of regimes since Abdel Nasser, going through Sadat and ending with Mubarak. Egypt has received lots of aid from foreign countries, with these countries specifically targeting slums and rural areas uplifting, but nothing has become of it. This has pushed the rural dwellers into a feeling that they're being used only as a media product, only when disaster happens. Traditional media used rural problems to polish verbal decisions by the ruling family, but nothing more. Traditional media also never put them in good light. I'm talking television and newspapers. For good reasons, of course. But I don't know if these reasons are enough. These reasons are that the rural areas and these slums house the toughest criminals, the highest crime rate, the highest unemployment rate, the highest of anything bad, for lack of better terms. But that doesn't mean that 14 million people should be painted with a broad brush. In 2007, Facebook launched internationally. These people, who are as poor as it gets, have finally found a medium to communicate with Egyptians. Facebook, believe it or not. I have heard time and time again how social media is not a powerful tool, that you can't get anything representative out of it. But this is not the case. I was an executive producer for one of Egypt's political nighttime shows called Baladna bil Masri, Our Country in Egyptian dialect. That's the literal translation. We tried to focus and shed some light on rural dwellers, some of them living in sewage, I have to tell you. But the general mass wasn't really ready to accept that this segment of society exists. So it never really took off. Nobody even bothered to take a look at these people. Believe it or not, the only time that we felt that we succeeded in shedding some light on their problems and their lifestyles was when social media started, when it became massively dispersed in Egypt. We would shoot a report about an impoverished village that houses 5,000 people who sleep in sewage, and then post it online on Twitter and Facebook, and it would get interactivity like you've never seen before. Traditional media failed to shed proper light on these people. They couldn't reach the areas properly. They concentrated on certain aspects only, and the result was lack of public interest. Going back to social media, before it started being circulated and used in Egypt, rural dwellers felt unaccepted, shunned by society, and they started to create their own set of moral standards, rules, and even arts and culture. Nobody ever knew anything about it. And by the way, just to be fair, before social media started in Egypt, 2007, the only outlet or media outlet that ever represented rural dwellers, coming mostly from Upper Egypt, the farmers, was the cinema. And it always regarded them as drug abusers, sexual deviants, and a general menace to society. Of course, with all this, rural dwellers grew angrier as all governmental plans failed, widening gaps in terms of finance, higher living prices, prosecution and torture by corrupt police, Ministry of Interior, and general labeling in the media as outlaws and as a danger to society. They would actually terrify us in traditional media and say, beware of the hunger revolution. When social media stepped in and Facebook took a steady rise in Egypt, it was commonly used for, making acquaintances, sharing pictures and whatnot. But by 2010, Egyptians figured out that Facebook can be used as an outlet to share information actively. And this was used by rural dwellers in an incredible manner. Internet in Egypt is very cheap. It's as cheap as using a landline. And computers are also very cheap. A computer now in Egypt costs anywhere from $70 to $80, standard computer to log onto the internet and browse. So they started sharing torture videos. They started sharing how they lived their lives. They started sharing their music, which was unlike anything Egyptians have ever heard. And then the revolution started, 2011. A large part was pushed by videos being circulated on Facebook and Twitter of abuse towards this segment of society. And they played an integral part in the revolution. Some academics who tried to document what went on during the first 18 days of the Egyptian revolution said that rural dwellers, because they witnessed the worst kind of treatment, they were forced to actually protect Tahrir Square against the regime. Anyhow, my point is, because of social media, rural dwellers, who are often misquoted and misunderstood and misrepresented in traditional media, were finally in touch with the rest of Egyptians through social media. It reshaped their position in traditional media's interest. You can now finally find local Egyptian television covering events going on in rural areas. More privileged Egyptians are starting to also shed light on rural dwellers' problems, bridging the gap between journalists and rural dwellers. Social media is definitely helping in bridging the gap. But I don't know if you have an eye on Egypt these days. Do you? I think it's going to take a bit more than social media to get everybody in touch with each other and get media to properly represent Egyptians, especially with tectonic shifts of ideology in Egypt. And that's it. I have nothing else to say, actually. So if you want to ask questions, I'll be waiting for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Maybe we can just continue the conversation,
yes,
and then we can have questions. I think seeing the news, I believe it was just the day before yesterday. For a start, we see that the internet in Syria has been shut down.
That's true.
I don't know what it's like in Egypt. Can you visualize anything similar happening in the present state of affairs, that Morsi would influence something like that, like shutting down the internet? If you are saying that the role of Facebook and internet has played such a role in the Arab Spring?
I don't think that President Morsi will ever come close to internet again in Egypt. As a matter of fact, even Vodafone, they were sponsoring the Wi-Fi hub in Tahrir last Tuesday. Mm-hmm. So they were trying to make up for what they were part of during the first 18 days of the revolution. Social media is playing a very, very big part right now. Last week, I'm sure you know, President Morsi pushed forward a new constitutional amendment that gave him sweeping powers, which pretty much puts us in ground zero once again. But less than a couple of hours after he released the constitutional amendment, it was shared and interpreted on Facebook and Twitter. And only a few hours afterwards, lots of Egyptians, users of social media, and those who are influenced by the users, pushed down to the streets again to call for the cancellation of this decree.
I think watching the images here, I think many of us were very surprised by the quick mobility and huge numbers of people turning out to Tahrir. Do you see with social media that then both different groups are mobilizing, both using the same tools with social media?
They are, actually. The Muslim Brotherhood, which is now in command, they are very powerful. They have what we call لجان إلكترونية, يعني internet committees, just small young youth that believe in the ideology and who are a part of the Muslim Brotherhood organization. They launch very, 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 very powerful counterattacks to anything pushed forward by citizens who push for change. So yes, social media is definitely used by both parties.
When we think of our topic here was migration, is what's happening now, is it going to escalate to cause new migration? Are we going to see the country overcoming new, more dictatorial ideologies, or
I'm not sure. I'm not sure about dictatorial policies, but because there is strong opposition in the ground. But yes, immigration has already started. It actually started since the beginning of the revolution. I read an article a couple of days ago that close to 200,000 Christians immigrated to Western countries, namely the US and Canada, for fear of Islamist prosecution. But not only them. I know this as a matter of fact because I have personal family and friends who immigrated when they saw that the situation was not getting better anytime soon. And at the same time, with the rise of the Islamists in Egypt and their foreign policy, more and more neighboring countries we see lots of influx coming from them, especially Palestine, which yesterday, which actually last week, I'm not talking about the UN resolution now, but I'm talking about last week, actually 2 weeks ago, there was a new camp for the first time in Egyptian history, actually, for Palestinian refugees in Sinai being set up. So yes, definitely there's a strong immigration current that's going on in Egypt right now, both with an E and I, both in and out of the country. The situation with the slums is not getting any better, though, because after the revolution and how the Interior Ministry, police, namely, they pulled out. So the number I talked about, which is 1,250, has grown. This was October 2011. This statistic. So because of the state of lawlessness, and social media does not help here, definitely.
Do you think that with the development of the slums, it is quite often a typical kind of situation where groups can then get in onto that and be the carers? We've seen this in many of the radicalization processes, that then, of course, an ideology can come and say, I'm going to care for you. Do you think this is a potential that may cause more young people to go to the Muslim Brothers?
Actually, this already happened, because it's a play on religion, and it's this is how people get votes in Egypt, in countries such as ours, with a 40%, 50% illiteracy rate,
yes,
40% under poverty line. It's very easy to buy votes by pushing forward, religious overtones, and of course, rice and oil and some clothes, maybe a sandwich.
How do you see the media coverage in Europe on Egypt? Do you follow that? Do you have opinion on how
I do watch the Deutsche Welle.
Yes.
I think the coverage is mediocre, I have to say. There's a certain problem with sending natives to foreign countries to cover politics. They do they do not understand how things work on the ground.
That's a very interesting point, because that's getting really in on the conversation we had this morning about persons with a non-original German background being in the media here, but we still send out to other countries instead of having correspondents there who are immersed in the culture. Now, how do you get a balance between the two? Because I think to go from the one to the other would be rather doing things in reverse, which we're trying to do away with here, that you have to get over the division of ethnic culture as a qualifying point of being, of covering a certain question. So how can you get sort of both? Being immersed in knowing the country from the local, but also knowing the global to cover both aspects.
Well, your best bet is to hire a local with international knowledge.
Okay.
You know, when I did my master's in the US, I worked for CNN for a bit. And my aspiration then was to become a local reporter who covers Middle Eastern stories.
Yeah.
Of course, this has changed. You know, it never really saw the light. But part of this was because I saw this general attitude that you have. You're not American enough to do this. So I don't know what happens here in Germany, but maybe there's a parallel to it.
I think it's a question we certainly have to address and have a look at. Maybe before we go to the public, I'd ask you just to tell us a little about Kerem Shenavi's work on the Salafist, because again, what do we really know about Salafist movements in Egypt? I don't know if you know anything about Salafist movements here. Of course, we always have to be careful that we don't exaggerate, but certainly we can see that here in the German European context, Salafists are more visible. If they are more, we could put a question mark, but they are more visible.
They're still visible in Egypt.
Okay, can you perhaps tell us what Kerem, what his work is on, and the film we would have liked to have shown if he'd been able to join us?
Well, the film actually narrates the rise of Salafism in Egypt when it started, namely early in the 19th century, at least the influence in Egypt, and details how they were a violent group who wanted to basically carry out their own interpretation of Sharia law on us all. And they went militant in the 70s and 80s and the early 90s in Egypt. And the film goes to show how there's a problematic existence in Egypt with Salafism because the country is a majority of Muslims who are by definition Sharia obeyers but are moderate, and then they see these people who are in their minds extremists, and they call a conflicting relationship between them and the remainder of Egyptians. It's a good movie. You should have definitely shown it here.
One of the questions that we have been addressing within and without the Anna Lindh context is, how do we deal with this kind of trend, if it's a trend or it's not, to have responsible media coverage. So as not to exaggerate, but at the same time, not put things which should make us uneasy under as we say, under the carpet, just so as not to disturb people or to be politically correct. Or how would you see that kind of question?
I can talk with you about my own personal experience with it, actually. The show, before the revolution, covered social problems in Egypt, So we never really had any need to get, more accurate, because we had a very limited free space to move in. But as soon as the revolution started, we started relying on social media for, I wouldn't say accurate, but I would say up-to-date information. And this was actually, as much as it was useful, it was also problematic. When you fuse social media with traditional media, you need to set up filters that guarantee that you have accurate information. We fell, actually, a couple of times, we fell short of reporting complete truths because we relied on improper sources coming from, especially Twitter, people who claimed who were on the ground in the revolution and that they were witness to, but they weren't, or they had incomplete information. So we had a couple of faux pas on the air. But having a source like Twitter is incredibly useful at the same time. It gives you an extra edge. It gives you an extra means to get new information, up-to-date information, different opinions, and then you can filter anything you want, and you can double-check everything you want using the normal methods used in traditional media and journalism. Get your facts checked with whoever sources you want. But this is how you do it, especially in this day and age. You can't do it alone anymore. You need to get real-time feedback from the people.
I think also a problem that we are having is the visual images which are being put onto the net. Often they have been manipulated. Have you any experience with your own?
Lots of the counter-revolution people in Egypt thought that everything was photoshopped.
Okay.
There was one particular battle, we called it Ma'arak al-Gamal, the Camel's Battle. There were the protesters in Tahrir Square, and suddenly they had a pack of camels and horses and donkeys attacking them. They were pushed forward by previous regime, and people who were implicated, they said that it was photoshopped. So yes, the entire revolution was photoshopped. Yes. You have to. That's what I'm saying. As increasingly important it's becoming to use social media and traditional media and journalism, you can't do without it. You can't. Like yesterday, I was watching CNN, and there were a couple 100,000 people in Tahrir Square against the new Constitution amendment. Yes. And he was repeating Muslim Brotherhood rhetoric without looking at social media and seeing how big it is. And it is empirical. He can actually measure. He can get a representative figure out of social media users in Egypt. But he chose to just echo certain ideology, and this was flawed in my opinion, because at the end he should report facts and numbers, not opinion, right? And he should use definitely the internet to scour for information before going on the air. This was very old guard to just, repeat whatever the official spokesperson tells you. So.
Okay, maybe a last question, then we'll go into the public. What can you tell us about today?
What about today?
What is happening today in Cairo?
In Cairo today, the Muslim Brotherhood, when they saw the Tuesday marches, and by the way, the Muslim Brotherhood account on Twitter was quick to deny that these numbers are representatives and said, 100 to 200K. And I don't know in Germany, but in Egypt, apparently 100 to 200,000 people are not representative. And, people get information off of the Muslim Brotherhood account. Anyhow, they saw the people down in the streets protesting the Constitution, so they started calling their own Muslim Brotherhood people, and they got them in buses, and they shipped them to Cairo from all over Egypt, from all the governorates. They shipped them to Cairo, and they are basically protesting that we are protesting. So that's what's going on right now. There were calls for civil war, but of course, in Egypt, I think it's a bit far-fetched, at least in the foreseeable future. Things will die down very quickly because the constitutional amendment, whether we like it or not, will be passed, given their power to manipulate the system and push for and actually get votes using their reach around Cairo. So as of yet, things are peaceful, but it's very bipolar, I have to say. And this is a first for Egypt, which has always prided itself of being, a unity. So we'll see where it goes from here.
Thank you very much.